Brendan Owens, Prairie Sun Solar, here with one of our former customers, Stephen Hall. He's done a few solar systems, one with us and one with a previous company, and we're just going to kind of walk through his system here and talk about why it's been done and how we got to that point, and going through the initial design and just a few different things that you'll kind of learn about solar and kind of hit some frequently asked questions and kind of just jump around a little bit. Yeah, so Stephen's system, we have 32 panels installed. They're all facing just about perfectly south. Each panel is 460 watts. We're just a little over 14.5 kilowatts on the DC side. And then we have your AC inverter, which is 11.4 kilowatts.
So the big thing with my system is that was kind of, great and surprising is that when I initially talked to you and Catlin, my old system in my previous house was 7.69 kilowatt, 30 panels. And what was interesting is when I talked to you guys, my system ended up being almost double the size at 14 and change kilowatt.
Yeah, 14.5 kilowatts.
The price actually was about the same. And so I literally doubled within the space of 8 years, the ability for me to generate electricity for the same cost doubled. So it's kind of shocking how quickly the technology kind of evolved and got better and got, more efficient. And the only other thing that we did sort of discover through, and this is one of the things I appreciated actually about what you guys kind of brought to the table, was like optimizing my system. So technically, the way it was explained to me, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but, I can produce a certain amount, so peak output might be, close to, if it's a 14 kilowatt system, it might be close to 14 kilowatt if the, sun is perfect and so on. But you or Catlin pointed out that in order for me to accommodate that, I'd need maybe 2 inverters and so on, and you sort of explained that the cost benefit to that didn't make sense.
Yes.
And so, because really the amount of time that you're going to be in that peak zone is very short.
Very minimal.
And so you look at it, and I think even Catlin did some math for me. It's like, oh, okay, sure, I can get another inverter. I think getting a second inverter was the option. It's like, well, that doesn't actually make sense for the amount of benefit. So I really appreciated that part of the relationship, is like right sizing the system. I mean, it's a big system. I wanted it to be a big system. Yeah. But other than that, it was fairly straightforward. I mean, really it was a matter, the process was a matter of deciding how big I wanted it to be. And that was a function of how much space I had on my roof, to be honest. I wanted to maximize the possibility. And then navigating through some of the programs, you were the guys actually that pointed out, this was almost a year or maybe even 18 months before I pulled the trigger on the system, pointing out the program at Greener Homes and saying, hey, just so you know, this is coming. It wasn't even in place yet. It's like, this is coming, and you might want to consider this. And it was the 2 parts of the program. One was the grant part, but then the almost better in a way for me was the interest-free loan. And again, you guys were like ahead of the curve on that and saying, hey, keep an eye on this. And then I think within like a day of that, you might still have the email or the text from me. It's like the day is like, okay,
it's here.
It's here. Let's go.
Yeah, it's amazing how some of that stuff works out. And it is super important to kind of go through your system in detail before you make that decision. And one of the kind of common pieces that you talked about there earlier is just that AC-DC ratio, which in layman's terms, I mean, DC being direct current, AC being alternating current. DC is what your panels produce, and AC power is what your inverter uses. And so you're basically changes the DC current into AC current, and your house just likes AC current. So everything that you plug into the walls, it's AC power. You can't actually use DC directly, and quite commonly you'll be like, oh, well, what is DC used for? It's actually in batteries, is kind of your most common spot. And so with that kind of bit of information, we always like to make sure that the sizing ratio is there, specifically with your place, where we went with the 11.4 kilowatt system AC instead of, two 7.6 kilowatt inverters. As you said, you're not always going to be producing, if you have 14.5 kilowatts, you're not producing 14,500 watts all day as soon as the sun's up. There's a bit of a curve, a bell curve that kind of works up through the day and rolls through the peak, and we like to show that to our customers of what your production looks like. So there's very little time where you actually will be clipping, and your house being all facing one way, it makes sense to keep that ratio within 10 to even 20% oversizing when it's southern facing. If you get into some of those east-west facing systems where half the panels are on the east and half the panels are on the west, you can actually make that gap even a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Where sometimes you'll even get up to 50% oversizing.
Right.
And it's all that cost benefit that you want to take a look at and see, how much of that power are you going to use in real time, how much you might be sending to the grid. So all those things kind of help when you're telling the story on how it works too. So
yeah, one of the things, like hearing you say all of that, one of the things as a solar owner now, you do get a bit nerdy on like being excited to learn. A lot of what you've described, it's like, I've learned along the way, a lot of it from you. And I find that really great because it gives you more of an appreciation. It kind of in a way validates why you did it in the first place. It's like being more aware of our energy consumption in particular, and then managing, how we both use it, but in my case, generate it as well. So for instance, one of the issues I had in the first year was some shading issues, and Catlin had pointed this out. Like it was either you or Catlin had done a kind of a
model,
an estimate, a model, and showed, look, this tree here. Well, that tree actually was not a healthy tree, and in fact, my wife had plans to kind of add a different tree. So it's like, okay, well, that's not a bad thing. Let's take that tree down. I killed two birds with one stone. It's like I solved my shading issue, and my wife gets her new tree. And it was great because of course, as I say, you become a bit of a nerd. So I'm watching my daily production, and I think I sent you a text on the day that I exceeded 100 kilowatt hours in one day, which is just such a cool feeling, but that awareness, it's great, and you guys were so patient, I'm going to say, with me, asking a lot of questions as I learn more. You kind of want to ask more and so on. So that was great.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. A lot of those little behavioral changes you start to make, and I have a solar system too, where I'll run my dishwasher. Instead of doing it at 9 at night, I'll set the timer for 12 hours for when the sun starts kicking up. Like, I'm not unloading it till when I get home from supper anyway. I'm not doing it in the morning, so I'll just time that dishwasher to start when it's sunny, and then now I'm using that power directly.
So my wife and I were talking about this the other day. It can be perceived as a little uncool to have air conditioning because of climate change and so on. And I'm like, no, because when the sun is shining, that's when it's hot. And when the sun is shining is also when my panels are producing lots of energy. And so I can run my air conditioner guilt-free because I know I'm using 100% generated power or energy to offset that. And so it's great. So this idea that you're aware of maximizing your energy consumption when the sun is shining, you just change your life a little bit. Sometimes it's a happy coincidence, like on a sunny day when it's hot and you've got an air conditioner you need to run. But those other things as well. I mean, I don't have an electric vehicle yet, but the plan is to have an electric vehicle, and the idea of being able to charge my electric vehicle with zero marginal cost electrons feels really good,
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, that's a neat feature too, being able to add the EV and with your inverter setup being right here in the studio too, which is also your garage. You can come right off the inverter with the EV charger and not have to run a separate 240 volt plug, and you get your level 2 charger. So that's a nice bonus too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. And some of our customers actually have the smart charging option too. So you can set it so if it's plugged in all day, it'll only actually start charging when your solar energy has hit a certain level of usage. Say your house is using 3,000 watts consistently. And then your solar produces, say you're at 2,000, it's not going to start charging until you get over that 3,000. And then you're actually directly using all that energy, as you said, as you produce it too, rather than sending it back to the grid. So
Yeah, I love it.
yeah,
I love it.
yeah, it's just the more you use, the more independence. It's just a neat.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that is the plan. I mean, our system is far exceeds our current need. So our house uses somewhere around 9,000 kilowatt hours annually, and we produce 15,000 kilowatt hours annually. So I'm way overproducing, which for now is fine. I get some compensation for putting that into the grid. But the plan is add an EV, and then and do exactly as you've described, like charge it as much as possible with free electricity. So
From where your power bills were originally, where are they now that you have solar?
technically, I don't have power bills. I mean, I have a connection fee. So it's $37.50 a month is what I pay. None of that is for power per se, because I overgenerate actually. And so, yeah, I don't really have power bills. I have connection fees, which is good. I need the connection, because obviously I use electricity from Sask Power at night, and when the sun's not shining, when it's overcast or whatever. But I generate enough electricity when the sun is shining to compensate for that, so it evens out. So, yeah, I don't really have power bills.
Nice, that's great. Yeah, having a $37 a month fee for just having the meter on your wall, and then all the consumption covered by solar, it's a pretty sweet deal.
Yeah, it is. I mean, obviously there's the cost of the system, the capital cost of the system, and there's a payback on that. But, in the end, I did the math on it, and so for the period that I'm paying it back, it's about the same as what I used to pay for electricity. So it's a wash. But then after I own the system, and again, I've got an interest-free loan that I'm paying back. So in a few years, I'll own the system, and then, again, the capital cost has been dealt with. The system is good for at least 20 years. My sense is probably a lot longer than that, actually. I think it's warranted for, you'll tell me, is it 20 years or is it 12 years? I can't remember.
Yeah, so the panels come with a 25-year power production warranty, guaranteeing that at year 25 they'll be producing at 84%. And that's for the roof mount stuff. If you get into the bifacials, they have a 30-year power performance warranty. And at year 30, the guarantee on power production is 87%.
Right.
And that being said, panels to me are the most rigid part of the system and the most likely point to basically be consistent and have no issues. The areas where you can potentially see issues down the road is going to be your inverters. It's kind of your power electronics. You have the most components in the system. With those systems, they come with a standard 12-year warranty, and it can be extended up to 25 years too. But that's probably your most likely point of failure in a system.
Right.
It's kind of the heart and bread and butter of the system for sure.
Right. So again, I'm not worried about it at all. And so for me, the idea of having a capital cost that's been cleared in a decent amount of time, as I say, I benefited from a zero interest loan from Greener Homes, which is great. But eventually, my system would be paid for. I'll be generating electricity. I won't be paying for any electricity, or capital costs, because it will have been paid back. So it's it's a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, lots of people, we always use this analogy. Most people don't rent their house. They have a mortgage and they slowly pay it off. And we generally recommend the same thing with your power bill. I mean, it's something that you have to pay no matter what. So what's the cost of not doing it?
Yeah. Right?
And if that's $200 a month today, with an average power rate increase between 4 and 6% a year, depending on the year, that just continues to go up. Where, like how you've done it with a 10-year, $40,000 10-year interest-free loan, you kind of set yourself with a fixed payment, and at the end of 10 years, it's no longer a payment, and you own the asset, and it just saves you money. So
yeah, exactly. exactly. And you know, your point about hedging against future power rate increases, you know, the thing about that is that there's the projected power rate increases, but then there's the ones that, you know, could come out of the blue that could surprise us. And you just never know. You don't really know what that future is going to look like, except that it's likely not going to go down. You know, it's probably going to go up.
Yeah.
And how much it goes up? Well, if we're lucky, it might go up like 5% a year or whatever. But depending on certain other factors, it might go up a lot more than that. So, but the system cost is fixed, and paying it back at a fixed rate. And as I say, I generate enough electricity that I don't really have a power bill. I don't have a need. So yeah, it's a pretty cool sort of setup.
Yeah. How do you like the Solar Edge data monitoring setup, so where you can see all your panels and all the information? How do you like that?
I like it. My wife probably doesn't, because you end up nerding out on it and showing people, and it becomes this thing you're proud of and you want to kind of like connect with and monitor. And as I say, you know, because it's your system that you're generating, and you're able to sort of see the stats in real time. You're able to see the daily, monthly, yearly kind of production levels. No, it's been great. I'm a big fan of the Solar Edge monitoring system. But as I say, not everyone at every party is interested in seeing how much solar you generated. Some people are, but not everyone.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Does your solar system require batteries?
You know, as soon as the cost makes sense for battery, it makes sense for me for batteries. I mean, everyone's got their kind of price point for where things kind of make sense. I mean, the cost of batteries is coming down very, very quickly as the scale of production goes up, and the efficiency improves, and all of those factors. I do it because if I can preserve my electrons at full value, because right now, as you know, I can overproduce, but then SaskPower will only give me half of the value of what I produce, which I'm not going to pretend is not annoying to me, because of course I'll produce on a sunny day, I'll overproduce, I'll get half of the value, but SaskPower will sell that to my next door neighbor for full value. So it's like, But so I like the idea of preserving full value electrons with a battery. The way I might end up doing, depending on the EV that I get, is to use my EV as a bit of a backup for that, or at least maybe just charge it and use my extra capacity in that for the EV, for charging it for transportation. The other thing, of course, with batteries is if SaskPower changes its pricing model and has time of day pricing, that could justify actually getting a battery as well. I mean, I could add a battery. There's a certain cost to doing that. Right now, for me, I'm not. It doesn't make sense. But that could change depending on a number of factors. And as I say, it may be that I can use my EV in a way that kind of, does what I need it to do.
Totally.
So I'm not, again, I'm not against batteries at all. And in certain systems, in certain scenarios, they really make a lot of sense. Whether or not you have solar. I know in California, where they have time of day pricing, a lot of folks brought batteries in just so that they could be charging the batteries with cheap power, so that they can use it at peak power times. So
yeah.
So again, for me, I'm pretty diligent about doing the math on this stuff, and
totally.
It has to make economic sense. That's for me one of the most compelling reasons to do solar. I mean, there's definitely all of the environmental reasons. For me, I mean, on that note, actually, I originally considered solar because I had kids, and it suddenly occurred to me one day that I didn't want my kids, when they were grown up to look back and think that Dad knew about climate change and other concerns and didn't do anything. It's like, I just didn't want to be that guy. It's like, no, I want to try and do something. I know that I'm one person and you know, but that was kind of the thing that sort of set me on the journey. And then once I started looking into it and I realized actually I might be saving money. And then in my first system, I really did. I saved in the end, even factoring the capital repayment, I was saving about $50 a month. And so I was like, okay, this is a no-brainer. I'm saving money going with solar, including capital cost repayment. I did the math. I did a spreadsheet on all of this. It's like, wait, what? You know, I expected to have to pay more, and I didn't. I was saving. This system is considerably bigger, so it's a bit more flat. But as I say, once the capital cost is paid off, it'll all be free.
Yeah, nice. No, that's awesome. And I do agree too. For batteries and panels 10 years ago were here and they kind of came down at a steep curve, and now we've kind of come to this flat line where panels are at the best prices they've ever been. I think batteries are still here, and as they start to come down with a, you know, better efficiencies, lower weight, and cost just comes down, it's going to make a lot more sense.
Yeah.
And so most of the people that we see installing batteries aren't doing it today just for the cost. Just because the equation just isn't quite there. Lots will be doing it for other reasons, such as, you know, emergency battery backup, where their priority is making sure at the end of the day, if power is down, they're able to then power their fridge, their furnace fan, their lights, cover their basic loads, and keep that stuff online. So we do see a little bit going on there for sure.
Yeah, no, the cost curves on batteries, it's following the same. I mean, it's actually a classic curve that's been around for a long time. I believe it's called the learning curve, which is a weird name for it. But it's that you know, there's a very steep decline and then it kind of flattens, and you see it with almost any mass-produced technology, where it kind of follows that same curve. And so you're right. Like on the batteries, they're not quite as low, but boy, they're dropping fast.
Yeah, yeah, we're seeing that for sure. Yeah, when designing your studio, Stephen, what kind of factors did you take into it? And I know you were starting from scratch and you had solar before, so what kind of influenced your decision on how you should build and shape your roof?
So the decision about both the orientation, size, number of panels and so on, were all kind of part of an algorithm. My goal was to get as much solar as I could on the roof within the budget that I had, and to be as efficient as I possibly could, create a space that had good utility for me to be, you know, it's a workshop and kind of studio space, and, you know, so I wanted, you know, I didn't want to compromise on the function of my space, but I also wanted to maximize the amount of solar that I could put on the roof as well within the amount of money that I had to spend. So it's kind of like, and literally that was it. I just kind of kept kind of noodling, calling you guys a lot to kind of like narrow my, you know, or clarify my options and the costs of different things. I think you guys produced a few different scenarios for me based on some of those early kind of thoughts. But that was it. You know, it's a purpose-built building, and the main purpose is it's a studio space. It's a kind of like a workshop and tinkering space and whatnot. But then this very close second was maximizing my solar, maximizing my ability to generate electricity. Some of my situation was just fortunate that I had a property that allowed for the space to be built, and that faced in, or that allowed me to face the roof in the right direction, as you say, almost perfectly south. So, you know, some of it was just working with what I had, and then some of it was making decisions based on those three key criteria.
Yeah. How would you rate your experience working with us at Prairie Sun Solar? Just, you know, initial design versus, you know, the install team coming out and after everything's installed, and, you know, the post-install service.
Yeah, well, I'm here. I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
I had a great experience. I'm a big fan of Prairie Sun Solar. Big fan of you and of Catlin and Dylan and other guys on your team. It was a fantastic experience. You've got proof of this. Like, I sent you apologies for how much I was, how many questions I was asking and so on, and you guys never blinked. You never didn't accommodate my questions and concerns. So the especially was when I felt like I was really kind of pushing the limits of your patience with me as a guy that had lots of questions, but never had a sense that there was any pushback against that. So that was great. The install was fantastic. It was a great team that just arrived, and it went very, very smoothly. I felt very confident. I like looking out and seeing guys wearing harnesses, and I know that it's being done in a safe way. I know it's being done in a very competent way, and so that's always reassuring. You don't just have a bunch of guys show up and you start to think, oh, those guys know what they're doing. It's like that was never the issue at all. It was always, really felt good about that. The functioning, I don't think there were any issues at all, other than my slight shading issue, which I dealt with. So no, it's been great. It's been great, and I appreciate the ongoing kind of connection. It's running fine, so there's not as much of a need anymore,
Yeah.
But I know that if I did have an issue, I could call, and all of the responsiveness that was there in the pre and the production or installation would be there, for any issues I might have.
Yeah, no, that's great. And yeah, we always appreciate the business and the conversation. It's always a little deeper, so it's always meaningful. So that's always appreciated on our end too, Stephen. So thank you for that. What advice would you recommend to someone who's just starting to look at solar, and what would you recommend to them?
I get a lot of people asking me about solar. Actually, I've because people know that I've put a few systems in place, and so my number one recommendation is people do their homework. It's actually really interesting. There's lots of information on the internet that will help you. You can literally be quite specific about your circumstance and what you want, and then I would definitely recommend them calling you guys and asking for you to participate early on in the kind of like planning, because you gave me a lot of great guidance, and I think that that's a key part of it. It's going to be different for everyone. Their circumstances are going to be different. Their budgets are going to be different. And so it's best to kind of talk to people who are really knowledgeable and know what they're doing, and have a sense of what needs to happen in order for the installation to be successful. So those two things really is like, do your homework, call Prairie Sun Solar and let them know. It's like, hey, I'm thinking about this. What advice could you give? Yeah, and then just move forward confidently. I'm a big believer in that. We make decisions, and sometimes those decisions aren't quite what we expect, and so it's best to keep engaged and keep following through. But that's part of what you guys are able to offer. You're able to kind of help with that decision kind of process along the way to make sure that the outcome is as best as it can be.
Well, yeah, I just want to thank you, Stephen, for taking the time to let us into your studio and sit down and kind of talk a little bit of solar and talk about your experience with us. It's very much appreciated. And as always, we always ask, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, comments, post them in. We love answering questions and just want to continue further education around solar.